Well, I have some silly jokes with you about space. I'm talking about space today. So here's some kids' riddles. What do you call currency in space? Currency, what do you call that in space? Starbucks. Okay. In outer space, what type of songs do the planets sing? In outer space, what type of songs do the planets sing?
Star songs. Star songs.
That's a nice idea, star songs. That's incorrect. I'm sorry. We have Eli here, he might get these. Neptunes. Okay. All right. How does one astronaut on the moon tell another astronaut that he is sorry? He apologizes. Here's one for old hippies. This is an old hippie joke. It's a little tricky. What do you do when you see a spaceman? Park your car, man. Okay, and the last one, I just thought it was kind of funny, since somebody said, I went to the Air and Space Museum today. There was nothing there. It leads in a little bit to an idea I wanted to just share some ideas with you about, and think about a little bit together about holding space. It's a phrase, have you heard the phrase before, the idiom?
Yes.
It's a phrase we use a lot, typically in response to, someone is in a challenging situation or going through something or dealing with something, and we'll say, we're going to hold space for them. It's a powerful idea, and I think it bears a little reflection on what exactly we mean by that, and how we might do it more effectively, because it is a really powerful thing to do for ourselves and for one another. So I started exploring this idea of space. Here's the basic definition of space from the dictionary: the unlimited, three-dimensional expanse in which all material things exist and all events occur. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? An expanse. My only addition to that would be, revision would be, there's also inner space, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
So really it's not just three-dimensional, there's more dimensions than that. If we close our eyes and go into meditation, we're entering another space as well. So there's kind of inner space and outer space. But I like this idea that it's an expanse, an unlimited expanse. That's what we're talking about when we talk about space. So what's it mean then to hold space for one another? What are the characteristics of that? And it all has to do with this unlimited, expansive, non-judging, accepting, not undermining someone's own energy or wisdom, not trying to fix anybody, puts you in a kind of hierarchy, like you're on a higher level and you know better. It's not about that. It's not about being in a giving, superior giving role. Holding space is just being with in an accepting, non-judging, compassionate way, and holding that, the vastness of possibilities for one another and for ourselves. I think we've all had experiences of it. It's easier to think about when you think of examples of it than it is to define it, as it is true with so many spiritual qualities and characteristics. I think we could all tell stories of the impact on us from occasions when someone held space for us. I know there have been a number of times in my life, and I may have shared some of these before because they're so impactful. I was thinking once again of a nurse named Carolyn who helped care for my mother in her last days in a hospital in Atlanta. In those last couple of days when we were gathered around, and this was many years ago, this was 29 years ago, and there was very little hospice going on, very few resources like that, so it was in a hospital, and there was a lot of people staying away from us, because hospitals didn't quite know what to do, so they couldn't fix you. Most of the staff kind of stayed away, but we had a nurse that final day. It was a tremendous blessing to us. And she understood the power, the tremendous helpfulness of someone just being with you and holding space for you. And she would while others were staying around, she would come into the room off and on throughout that last day to just sit with my brother and sister and I, and not in a superior role like you should be doing this or you should do that, but in a very gentle way, maybe some little suggestions, but mostly just being with us and holding the space for us and kind of empowering us by that. There's a mystery to how it works, this holding space for, the tremendous impact of it. It doesn't seem like you're doing that much, when in fact it has tremendous influence. And my guess is there were others who held space for Carolyn along the way, where she learned how to do that for others. And then she demonstrated it for me and my family, so that we could hold space for others going forward. There's a kind of an invisible legacy of this kind of spiritual quality, or these kind of spiritual characteristics. There's an invisible legacy to it that gets passed along, and rich blessings they are. Rich blessings they are. Holding space, it's really a deep spiritual principle, and I believe it's been taught in all spiritual traditions. Jesus certainly taught it in a number of different ways. One of the best known scriptures is this one from Matthew 5, about how you should love your neighbor. It says the Mosaic law, which you've grown up on, says love your neighbor and hate your enemy. He says, I say, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be like children of your Father in heaven, who makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and his rain to fall on the righteous and the unrighteous. The great inclusiveness of God, unconditional. The rain and the sun for us all. He's suggesting this openness, this inclusiveness. He's saying extend it to everybody. Hold space for everyone. In fact, I thought it was fascinating when I learned this years ago from the work of Neil Douglas Klotz on the Aramaic translations. What Jesus was really speaking to the crowd was the spoken language of Aramaic. And pray for those who persecute you. The meaning of pray for in that context, because Aramaic had several layers of meaning, often for the same phrase. What wound up in the translation in our Bible was like one word, but they heard something different. When they heard pray for those who persecute you, what they were hearing was more like open space for the troublesome among you, for the people giving you problems, for the antagonists, for the troublemakers. Hold space for them. All inclusive. In other words, don't shut down on. Don't exclude the troublesome, the difficult in our communities, in our midst, or maybe ourselves. Don't shut down. Don't say that's it, you've screwed up. Don't shut down with condemnation or judgment, because when we shut down those qualities, we shut out compassion, we shut out empathy. We shut out the ability to think creatively, to be open to possibilities and opportunities as they come. When we get locked down in judgment or exclusion, those faculties aren't operating in us anymore. We get just all kind of hard-edged. You know what I'm talking about? It's a common experience in life, and it's work we're doing all the time. And I certainly know I don't hold space perfectly for all people all the time, including for myself. How many of us get self-critical sometimes and really condemn ourselves for mistakes we've made, or things we haven't done right, or things we didn't know at the time? We need to hold space. Never. It's wonderful. We need to hold space for ourselves very strongly too, and never write ourselves off and never condemn ourselves, but stay wide open to that expansiveness of God that we live and move and have our being in which all possibilities exist, so much more than we can see. We should never give up hope on ourselves or anyone or our communities. So opening space for, there's a great mystery to how it works. I have a quote here from Emmett Fox. How many of you read Emmett Fox? Wonderful New Thought teacher and writer, early 20th century. He said, he's good on this mystery. He says, all around us lies a realm of infinite power, a great universal power, which we can train ourselves at any time to tap into. It's present everywhere, belongs to nobody in particular, belongs to all. A realm of infinite power. Great universal power we can develop the habit, we can train ourselves of tapping into, of opening to, and then we're open to this vastness, this expanse. I think it's what Jesus talked about is the kingdom of God. It's here. It's available to us, everybody. It's not exclusive to anybody. It's not just for good people. It's for all of us. It's for all of us. And that's powerful. It's powerful to know that's available to us, that we are connected with it. It's available to us at all times. I was reading an interview, hearing part of a podcast I was listening to, with a new discovery for me, a writer and a Zen priest by the name of Angel Kyoto Williams. I really like her work, but she talks about space as love as space. And I think it's a powerful way of thinking about it. She said, it's developing our own capacity for spaciousness within ourselves to allow others to be as they are. That is love. And that doesn't mean that we don't have hopes that things are changed or shifted, but that to come from a place of love is to be an acceptance of what is, even in the face of moving it towards something that is more whole, more just, and more spacious for all of us. It's bigness, it's allowance, it's flexibility. Spaciousness, our capacity for spaciousness, to include everyone in that. It seems to me that is how love operates, how it is in action most of the time. Maybe not all the time, we're all practicing it imperfectly, I think, but don't all parents do that, for instance? In the face of acting out or behavioral things, you don't write them off. You don't do that. You don't say, oh, this is hopeless. No. You see this as a temporary thing. It has nothing to do with the wholeness and the uniqueness and the wonder of that child growing up. You hold space. These things are going to get worked out. These are blips on the screen. These are growth pangs. All will be well. We don't always extend that same thing to the people all around us in our communities or ourselves. Can we bring that same spaciousness? It's part of the process as we grow, as we evolve. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We goof up. We're unpleasant sometimes. It's all part of the process. We don't write ourselves off or each other off for that. We just hold space. It's kind of like reserving judgment and never writing off as hopeless. There are always possibilities because of the vastness of this universal life force all around us. So how do we practice holding space? I'm drawing on someone else new to me, Heather Plett. She has 8 points of practice for holding space. And I thought these were really helpful to keep in mind. It reminds me of how much work I have to do, because I think there's a lot to really being good at holding space for ourselves and one another. First one, give people permission to trust their own intuition and wisdom. That's empowering for people. You never want to take that away from people. People need to be aware that they have their own guiding wisdom. They have their own deep wisdom and intuition to draw upon. Second one, give people only as much information as they can handle. If you're in a role where you clearly have a lot of information that might be of use to someone in what they're going through, you don't give them a lecture on it. Have you ever gotten too much information from somebody? Do you know the feeling? It kind of makes you feel like, what, am I incompetent here? Right? It makes you feel sort of like you want to put up barriers. Too much information. It kind of makes people feel like their own wisdom isn't being respected, like it's being suggested they don't know anything or don't know enough, or like the other person just really wants to show off how much they know, which is a little ego in the way, and it happens. There's a store I used to go to often where you'd ask for a little help with gardening things, like plants and stuff, and you'd get a big lecture, a big horticultural lecture, a great big like, too much information. Got to boil it down. That happens a lot in holding space situations. You give people only, like the nurse Carolyn who came into the room all that last day with my mother, she knew a lot more about caring for a person who was transitioning than we did, certainly, but she didn't burden us with a lecture. She would come in and out, she might make a gentle suggestion, this might make your mom more comfortable, you might think about that, or you might, something about, you might give yourself a little rest, take a moment to breathe, or step out. She'd make a gentle suggestion here and there, but it never disempower us. Never disempower us. So giving us only as much as we could handle at the moment. That's gentle. That's a good way of holding space for one another. Don't take their power away, especially in terms of decision making. That's the third one. No matter what situation people are in, they want to know that they have power to choose and decide, because we do until we're out of here. That's kind of an inviolable thing about a human journey, is that we have decision power, we have choosing power, and even when if we're ill or going through a challenge like that. We want the people around us who are holding space for us to honor us as what we think matters. Our judgments, our decisions, our choices matter. 4, keep your own ego out of it. That has to do with that too much information thing, but it also has to do sometimes with taking our own influence too seriously. There can be ego involved in that. If you're holding space for someone, wanting to help someone, and you think it really all rides on you, and I would suffer from that in my early days as a teacher. When I was teaching English classes, you would take too seriously, your influence on your students. Like it all rests on you, it all rides on you. There's too much ego involved in that. None of us has that kind of power to fix or control or manage somebody else's lives. I can tell you in ministry, that's a really important lesson to get early on. You cannot take everybody's problems home with you. You cannot, because you cannot heal everybody. You are not God. You do not have that kind of wisdom and resource. None of us do. We all have a deep connection, and we can be empathic, and we can hold space for, but we can't let our egos get in the way to the extent that we think we're in control, or we are making things happen in people's lives. 5, make them feel safe enough to fail. That's a way we hold space. I think in any number of workshops and classes I've been in over the years, and I've been in songwriting classes and acting improv groups and all kinds of groups. You've probably been in a lot of things like that too. The best ones have a facilitator who makes it really clear we're all going to goof up, but we all want to take risks and we want to try things, and that's all good. That's all part of the process. And if something doesn't work out, don't worry about it. That's great. And then people can really shine because they won't beat themselves up on what they haven't done well or what they failed at. I thought once again about the wonderful Sharon West. Some of you old-timers from Unity of Columbus. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you old-timers, but some of us who remember, she did these wonderful vocal workshops with people at Unity of Columbus over a number of years. Any of you take that? A lot of you took it. Wonderful. Fantastic. Excellent. I think they went over a period of several weeks, maybe once a week, and a lot of the people in the classes were people who had never really sung in front of people before, and maybe people who had been told early on they couldn't sing, which, a lot of people get that message. How many people were told early on they couldn't sing? You gotta throw that out. You gotta throw that out. Sharon would say, if you can talk, you can sing. If you can talk, you can sing. And she would get people in that workshop by creating this safe space, safe enough to fail in, safe enough to take risks in. People would try, people who had never sung before. By the last class, there would be a performance at the end where everybody would get up and sing their number that they'd been working on in front of an audience, a pretty good sized audience. And it was wonderful to see people really, and she would introduce each one like they were, a star performer, as they come out to do their performance. That is the kind of the power that can happen when a safe place is created. You're holding a safe space. This is a place where we're all going to try some things out, and they may not work, but it's okay. Let's have some fun. Let's express ourselves. Let's get our voices out and see what happens. That feels good, and that makes creative energy flow so much more strongly. 6th one, give guidance and help with humility and thoughtfulness. Sometimes it makes sense to kind of withhold ideas. We want to be humble. We need to remember we don't know everything. We're drawn on our own experience. There may be things we don't know here, so we're thoughtful about that, about how much guidance we offer. And we do it humbly, because we could be wrong. It could be limited. We might be right to some extent, but it could be limited. There could be more that they need to know, that it's not going to come from you. Maybe you have some gentle suggestions. This can be hard to do, especially when we think, I know they should be doing this. And sometimes we feel that very strongly, but then that's not practicing that kind of thoughtfulness, humility. Quite often people will sort of shut down if you come on too strong with your judgment about what they should be doing. Have any of you had an experience of this? I think it's a pretty common thing. It's well intended, but when we come on too strong without humility and gentleness, it often will kind of be an impediment to holding space for it, opening, healing space for. So we need to do that always with gentleness and with wisdom, really reflecting on, would it be helpful to offer this idea and to try to do it in a way that's gentle and non-intrusive. I've had people give me advice that was very aggressive, very in my face. Have you ever gotten aggressive advice? You don't tend to want to receive it. And so it'll fail in your deeper intent, which is to help. It'll falter in that. So giving guidance and help with humility and thoughtfulness. 7 is create a safe place for complex emotions to arise. That's a good one too, and a hard one not everyone can do. Like back in that hospital experience with Carolyn, I think that's why a lot of people stayed away from the room. They really didn't want to encounter some of the complex emotions associated with grief and loss that were going on in the room. Carolyn was able to hold space for that. It's okay. It's all right. You can cry. You can express anger. It's all right. We've created, it's a safe space for that here. It's all right. Not everyone is comfortable with that, and I think that's a skill we cultivate as we practice holding space. I think we get better at it as we try it out, as we try to be with people who are in an emotional place, and allow that to be without judging it, without having to respond to it or worry about it. It's natural to experiences in life, deep experiences in life. Emotions will rise and fall strongly. It's such a blessing to be able to share that with someone who's not going to be upset by it, who can sit with it, who can be with it. And when I did hospice volunteer work for several years, I had opportunities to practice that, to be with people who were sitting, by bedsides of loved ones, people who were dealing with grief and loss, and had a lot of emotions. And sometimes family members are trying to keep it under control for other family members. They don't want to, give vent to emotions and so on because it might upset their loved ones or their children. So they can't express it elsewhere. What a blessing it can be to have someone holding space for you. It's all right to tell them how you're feeling. It's all right to cry. It's all right to express your anger or whatever it is. What a blessing that is. A safe place for emotions to rise up. And then the last one, number 8, allow people to make different decisions and have different experiences than you would. I don't know have you ever had an experience of trying to help someone and praying for them and trying to hold space for them, and then they wind up making a choice you wouldn't have made, and you don't understand. That's a humility experience for us when that happens, because it gets our ego out of the way. But it's an important thing to remember. We're all different journeys, different steps in those journeys, and we may or may not be right about what we think should be the next decision or choice of that person we're wanting to help. We may not know that. So allow that to happen. So it's a challenging process, I think, a challenging practice, learning to hold space for others as for ourselves. It's really the same things apply to ourselves. Be gentle with ourselves. Don't condemn ourselves. Don't write ourselves off. Don't barrage ourselves with more information than we can handle. All these things. Be gentle. Create a safe place for ourselves to express emotions, to try things out. It's all the same things. Openness to this great spaciousness of God within and all around us. And I think this is what we do in prayer all the time, too. As we go into that inner space, this is how we practice prayer, too. If there's someone we are lifting up in prayer that we're holding space for healing or for guidance through a confusing time, we open up to that vastness. We don't make judgments or condemn or think how they should be or dictate what their choices or decisions should be. We hold them in the spaciousness of God, knowing they are in touch with that vast, creative, life energy and receiving what they need from it. We're not detailing things. We are just lifting them up and seeing wholeness, regardless of any temporary appearances, just like the acting out child. We don't let us bother us, these temporary appearances. We are in touch with a living power and universal life force that makes all things possible. So we are holding them in the light. We are holding space for others, for ourselves, for our communities, for our country, for our planet. We hold space. This creative force, this vast expanse of God we're dealing with makes it such that we should never give up hope on anybody or anything. Would you agree? Say amen. 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 All right, I got another affirmation to conclude things with here. Inside and outside, I hold space for love to manifest. Will you join me in that? Inside and outside, I hold space for love to manifest. Let's take that into prayer for a moment and affirm that commitment, that truth deep inside. We commit ourselves to remembering this vast God we live and move and have our being within makes all things possible. So we hold space always, a space of loving kindness, of non-judgment, of peace, of acceptance, for all beings, for ourselves, for life everywhere. All things are possible. The life of God within us makes all things possible, and we are grateful. And so it is. Amen.
Amen.